Welcome to the Online Success Journey Podcast, your opportunity to discover and learn from entrepreneurs like yourself. This is not your typical podcast, but a place where you can get the real story and find out how real people encounter speed bumps and detours, but journey through to find success. Now here's your host for the Online Success Journey Podcast, Patience.
Hello everyone and welcome to Online Success Journey. This is episode 201. Are you ready to join the clan? Today we have Matt Johnson, a marketer, entrepreneur, podcast expert, musician, and the founder of the Pursuing Results, a podcast PR and production agency. Matt runs a world virtual team helping business coaches and agencies break in and dominate their niche through podcasting. He currently hosts a niche business podcasts such as YouX, Real Estate Uncensored, and recently launched the podcast Pitch Assistant training to help experts get pitched to podcasts consistently by their internal staff. Hello, Matt.
Hey, Patience, how are you?
I'm fine. I know the clan is anxious to hear your story, so let's get started with the basics. Can you tell my clan a little bit about your background, about what you did before you started your own online business?
Okay, so the quick story is, let's see, I was a pastor's kid, a musician. I bounced around for a while in a bunch of different jobs, didn't go to college, didn't get a degree in anything. I went straight into working for a big insurance company and then ended up getting into the sales and marketing. A couple of the big pivotal things were at one point, just before the crash, I started a real estate team and I read a really amazing book on how to build a team in that business and started to do that and ended up, there were certain parts of it that I really enjoyed. Turned out it was the marketing and the team building part, and that really stayed with me. So flash forward another few years after I bounced around from some sales jobs and kind of figured out more of what I wanted to do, I got back into the real estate space working with a marketing agency. And part of my responsibility there was to run online webinars. This is a few years ago back when Google Hangouts was a new thing, a new fun and exciting thing. And so I ended up doing Google Hangouts and helping them build out what they called their partner program, where we did webinars in Google Hangouts with all the leading influencers that they had relationships with in that space. And I went from doing that to landing a consulting gig with one of those people who wanted to build a coaching and consulting company from scratch, which I helped him do that and took an equity stake in that company. And then that led to starting a couple of podcasts and people starting to come to me for podcast production, because what I did for myself is I built a little team behind me that did essentially the whole part of the podcast production process, except for showing up and having the fun conversations like we're doing today. So I basically got to show up and do the fun bits and built a whole team to do all the rest of the behind the scenes stuff. And the more that I did that and the more podcasts I was hosting and producing, it just kind of started to steamroll and snowball, and people started to ask how I was doing that. And so I shared a little bit about the team and took on a couple of clients where they basically just worked with my team when my team wasn't working with me. And that worked for a little while, and then that broke, and I had to turn it into an actual business. So I kind of got out of everything else I was in. At one point, I was in 4 different businesses. I got out of all those and just focused on the agency. So now I run what I would call a podcast PR and production agency, and we basically do one thing. We produce podcasts for high-level business coaches and consultants, as well as the agency owners who serve that market, and we help them break in and dominate their niche by hosting their own podcast, very similar to what we're doing here, just where it's all based around conversations and solo episodes and kind of leading their people. So yeah, that's the short story of how I got to be where I am today.
What a great background, Matt. What is the most dangerous belief an online entrepreneur can have?
That is a great question. I've done a lot of thinking about beliefs. So I think one of the most dangerous beliefs that we can have is that dominating one niche or really being known for one thing locks us in and somehow will be confining and boring and unfun. My entire business kind of is based around the foundation of almost accidentally becoming the category king of podcasting for a very small but very lucrative niche of people. And in my case, it was real estate coaches. So in the real estate space, they were the people who had already built successful businesses and now were teaching other people how to do the same. And they were looking for a way to attract their ideal clients. And I happened to be podcasting in that same space, so I really understood the market really well. I spoke their language. I knew who all the players were. I went to their events. I'd hung out with them. And because of that, I understood the landscape really well. and I developed real insight and real expertise in that space. So when they came to me to launch a podcast, I knew how it should be positioned. I knew what would get them clients. I knew what would attract the right people. And because of that, I was able to build essentially a home base. And then from there, I was able to expand, right? So I think where we get ourselves into trouble is this belief that, well, if we go after one niche or we become known for one thing, we pigeonhole ourselves and we'll never get a chance to work with other people. And it just isn't true. All of my first clients were in real estate, and now we've got clients in several other spaces that we've been. But rather than me going out there and trying to reach out to people and cold call or message them on LinkedIn, I was introduced by a happy, successful client, which is completely different than going out and trying to start cold conversations. So there's a lot more we could say about that, but to me, that's the biggest misbelief that other freelancers have, and it's even the biggest misbelief that I deal with when new clients come in and want to launch a new podcast. It's always that misbelief that if you stick with one niche and get big and get known in that space, that you're somehow locked in forever, and you'll get bored and unfulfilled and end up just hating your own business.
All right, you've been in business for a long time. Why do you do what you do, Matt?
Well, I appreciate the compliment. I don't know that I have been in business for a long time. I went independent maybe 4 years ago. And the reason why I did that and the reason why I still do what I do today is I love the battle for ideas. I love ideas. I love concepts. I love strategy and systems. And my business, I essentially built it around my personality so that other people in the business do everything that I'm not good at and don't want to do. The business actually only needs about 3 things from me, and I figured out how to essentially structure it around myself so that other people do everything but those 3 things. And so I'm able to do just the part that I love to do. Part of it is having conversations like this. You know, I still host a couple of shows myself. I produce a bunch of others. I get to make amazing connections and relationships with really, really incredible people. And I get to help them make an impact in others' lives by giving them, you know, information and education and training to get their business to the next level. So I get all the things that I want. I get to talk about ideas all day long. I get to talk to really smart, really successful people, and I get to help those people make an impact on other people that may never know who I am. So the audience for my client shows may never know that I'm the mastermind behind that podcast, and I'm okay with that. I know that that's where I get my sense of fulfillment and impact, is knowing that those people that may never know who I am, their lives are changed by the podcast that we produce.
Let's put man aside. How do you know you are successful?
How do I know I'm successful? That is a great question. I think it's because, and everybody's different in this, but to me, success means control of what my day looks like. Who do I talk to? Do I have to talk to people I don't want to talk to? Do I have to do things I don't want to do? So to me, one of my definitions for success is when I wake up in the morning and look at my calendar, do I want to retreat back into bed? And a few years ago, the answer to that was yes, because I was in 4 different businesses, and it seemed like every call I had, I left with a to-do list of 5 or 10 things that were going to take me hours and hours to do. And it seemed like nobody else was leaving with those meetings with that size of a to-do list. And I felt like I was pushing 4 different rocks up 4 completely different hills. So it's definitely not always been like that. I think one of the keys to success for me personally, and I've heard this from a lot of other people, has been focus. Relentlessly doing fewer and fewer things and focusing on just doing the things that I'm world class at and hiring other people to do those other things. And then just getting out of doing so many different things that I was really focused on the one area where I had complete ownership and where I was most passionate, right? The thing that turned me on in the morning, the thing that made me want to get out of bed. And at some point I realized it wasn't any of those other businesses. It was my own agency where I had the most control and I felt like I had the most emotionally invested. So I just got rid of everything else and I focused on that one thing. And that's what kind of turned things around for me. And that's where when I started to really feel more successful was when I started doing fewer things, but they were things that I love to do and I'm really good at. And I made a lot more progress in a lot less time by focusing all of those activities on one business that was sold one thing to one person.
Can anyone be an entrepreneur, or are some people more cut out for it than others?
Man, that's another great question. I've also thought about this one a lot because I alluded to it that I was a pastor's kid and kind of bounced around a lot. I am not your natural entrepreneur. I wasn't selling candy to other kids, when I was 7 years old. I wasn't throwing newspapers at 14. I wasn't hustling. I wanted to be in the ministry. And then at one point I spent like 5 years chasing a pro music career. So I was in 4 or 5 different bands and stuff like that. So I definitely never considered myself an entrepreneur. I'm a systems builder. And I'm an idea and a concept and a strategy guy. Those things don't necessarily make for great entrepreneurs. They tend to make actually great operations people. So I have a business that runs like clockwork because that's actually my strength. What I did find, though, that I think might be helpful to other people is that I always considered myself not that great of a salesperson. And what I realized after getting further and further into my business is that the whole time I'd been in selling other people's stuff, that was the problem. The problem was I'm so independent that I'm only good at selling myself and my own stuff that I create. And I was terrible at selling everything else because for whatever reason, I just didn't believe in it as strongly. So it wasn't that I was a bad salesperson, is that I was selling the wrong things. And once I got into a situation where I was only selling my own thing that I created, and for the most part, I was talking to people that could really benefit from it, and I really believed in what they were doing, I was a great salesperson. And that was a huge turning point for me. I never realized that or expected that to happen. And so I do think that entrepreneurship can be for anyone. So if you don't consider yourself a great salesperson, if you don't fit the mold of the cool entrepreneur nowadays, which is, roller coaster ride of emotions, dyslexic, like all the stories you hear about entrepreneurs that can barely hold themselves together, but they have these massive up and down swings, and they'll make $1 million and then lose $1 million. That was never me. And I've gotten to be okay with that. And I've built a very good business for me that suits my personality. And I think basically anyone else can do the same thing. And I think there's going to be a lot of people that are forced into it, whether they like it or not. I don't know if you've heard this statistic, but somebody told me not long ago that there was a study done that predicted that within the next 30 years, half of the U.S. working population would be freelancers and consultants. Now, I think it'll take the rest of the world. Like South Africa still has 20 or 30 years to go before they're even where we're at right now, because my whole writing team is based in Johannesburg. And so I talked to them a lot about what entrepreneurship is like there, and they're a good 20 to 30 years behind, unfortunately. So I don't think the whole world is going to get there, but I know the United States and the UK and Australia will get there really fast, where half the population is, like me, just freelancers working from home. Either they have their own team or they're part of somebody's team. And so, yeah, I think that virtually anyone can find their place in this new world of entrepreneurship.
What have you learned from business as a whole?
That is a tough question because it's so wide ranging. Let me give you something that's more for the folks that are kind of in the figure it out stage, like the things that I would tell myself if I could go back and slap myself 4 years ago. There is a few things that I would say. So number one, I think that finding kind of the one person that we want to serve and impact is one of the biggest decisions that we will ever make. And it's definitely something that it didn't come easy for me. It didn't come fast. I felt like I wished I would have found it a lot sooner, but I eventually did find it. And when I did, it made everything better and easier, if that makes sense. So I think that if we have questions like that kind of rattling around in our head all the time, like who is the one person that I really care about serving and impacting and spending time with? Like, who are the clients that if they call me, I look forward to picking up their phone call? Who are the people that if they want to go out and grab a drink later, I'd actually look forward to going? If you're anything like me and you're on the introverted side, getting out and going to events and networking and stuff like that is not always the most fun thing in the world. And so you want clients that you actually genuinely enjoy. And for anyone that's in the freelance or building kind of an online business, we've got to have clients like that, because we can't have clients that we hate, because then we end up not wanting to take on more clients and it stalls everything out. But it all starts with us. It starts with, to me, that's the number one, like, most important decision in all of business. And it happens at that stage where we're just throwing a whole bunch of mud against the wall and seeing what sticks. We work with a whole bunch of different people, sell them a whole bunch of different stuff, and then we start to narrow down and figure out, okay, who is that person? Who's the person that I most enjoy spending time with and serving? And when I get results for them, I feel really amazing about it. If we can answer that one question, it makes everything else in business a lot easier, because then we can start figuring out, okay, once I know the person, then it makes it a lot easier to figure out, okay, what's the one problem I'm going to solve? Because now you know who you want to serve and you know what their biggest challenge is. Once you know what their biggest challenge is, you can come up with, okay, well, what's my solution to that challenge? And then that everything flows from just answering those first three questions. So yeah, if I were to go back and like teach myself 4 or 5 years ago, something that would have helped me a lot in that process, it'd be just those three questions.
In your business, do you have a mentor or a coach yourself?
I do, yeah. So I don't know what your experience has been, but mentors have been huge for me. I would consider everybody I've interviewed on a podcast a mentor, but I did meet my current business coach because I booked him on a podcast. And so we had a lovely conversation. Yeah, it was just like this, basically. I reached out and booked him on a show. We had a lovely conversation. We talked a little bit behind the scenes. And then he sent me a book because that's just part of his process. He thought there was a particular book that he had in mind that I would really enjoy. I received it, I devoured it, and immediately emailed him back and said, oh my God, this is the most amazing book I've ever read. Where did you find this guy? Where did you find this book? And that just kicked off a conversation that a year and a half later turned into me hiring him as my business coach. And there's a ton of other examples like that from my own life and from everyone I know who's involved in podcasting. Because one of the things that people ask me to speak on a lot about is just podcasting being the new networking. Because it really is, and it's been a great example in my life. All of my current mentors have come through podcasting, and I'm talking about people that I've literally have invited me to come live with them, like a level from meeting them initially on a podcast. So I can't speak enough about just how important podcasting has been for me, and anyone that's in the online field. It can do the same for you. You know, the conversation that we're having right now, we'll connect more deeply than if you and I had met. In the hallway at a conference or something like that, where we only have a couple minutes to try to chat and get to know each other. And then we try to follow up and we exchange business cards. And, that's the traditional way that people have met in business for, however many thousands of years. And today we have a whole better way to meet people. And that's by jumping onto a podcast and having a much deeper conversation like what we're having when we actually get to know each other better. And so that's been exciting for me.
What is the most valuable thing your mentor has told you?
That is another tough one because it's such a big question. I would say going back to my mentor, the CEO of the old agency I worked for before I started out on my own, he is the one that sat me down. I can remember it clear as day exactly where we were at in San Diego, and I had left his agency. I'd started my own thing. I was consulting. I was hosting a couple of podcasts, and he hired me to run 4 different podcasts in 4 different industries. And over the course of a couple months, I introduced him to 100 of the top influencers, 25 in each of those industries. And it led to a whole bunch of new high-level relationships for him. And in fact, their biggest client right now came as a direct result of that. It was an introduction from one of those podcast guests. And so at one point, a couple months in to that whole process where it was just going gangbusters and it was working like crazy, he just sat me down. He's like, Johnson, this is what you should be doing. So he's like, I think you found your one thing. His agency was very structured and packaged, and they sell one thing to one type of person, and they were looking for that one type of person in 4 new industries, and we found them. And he basically said, look, this worked so amazingly well. Everybody needs this, and you should just make this your one thing and go package it and sell it. And that was probably the most important piece of advice he gave, because that's what led to me starting and kind of turning this team that I had built that was doing things for me. That's what led to me turning it into an actual agency.
What is one thing no one knows about you?
That is a great question because I've been doing live podcasting for 4 years, so I actually don't know that there is. I'll give you one funny thing. So on my real estate podcast, I have a co-host on that show. He was the guy that originally pitched me on doing a podcast together, which is the whole reason I got into it to begin with. And at one point, we were doing role play for sales conversations, right? And so he essentially made up a fake wife for me and named her. And so we went through about 3 different names, and finally he settled on the name Julie, and Julie became my fake wife. And anytime we would role play through a sales conversation, he would say Matt and Julie. Then I had 1 kid. Then I had 2 kids. Then it became 3 kids. Then the kids were overweight. Then they were fat. Then they were diabetic and needed insulin. So now he has this whole thing. So people will come up to me at conferences, which I don't do a ton of real estate stuff anymore. But in the past, when we would go speak at conferences, people would come up to me and go like, hey, man, how's Julie and the 3 kids? And so the whole thing was made up. I don't have a wife or kids. And so that's one funny thing that people may not know.
Wow. Well, it made you popular. It made you start a conversation.
It is a conversation starter. That's right.
Wow. What grounds you?
I love being around people, and my old boss is one of them. And I've got a couple of other people in my life that are like this, where they are wildly unconcerned with what other entrepreneurs think of them or the latest fads in entrepreneurship. I like hanging out with people who are extremely focused and methodical and relentless and just keep on moving forward, and they don't get distracted by what everyone else is doing because they're so focused on their own life and building their ideal life and then building the business that will support them, that they don't get distracted by all the shiny objects. They don't care, when Gary Vee comes out and starts recommending everybody jump on Snapchat, they're like, no, come to me in 2 years when you can prove the Snapchat actually generates leads that convert into clients, and then maybe I'll think about it. So I love hanging around guys like that because as I'm sure you pay attention to the online scene. And basically, we're beat over the head with the opposite message, which is, hey, there's a new tool out. Hey, there's a new tactic. You should try this. Hey, this person just built a multi-six-figure business off of Instagram. Hey, this person's killing it on Snapchat, right? So we get beat over the head with that nonstop. We got enough of that. So I really enjoy hanging out with people that have the exact opposite mindset. That's actually what grounds me.
What is one thing that has contributed to your success?
I would say the number one thing is focus. The more focused I've gotten, the more successful I've been, the more easily his success has come, and the more I've enjoyed it. I think when we are very unfocused and scattered, and I see this a lot with my clients and my friends because they tend to be really, really hard charging entrepreneurs that can pretty much overcome anything they set their mind to. And so they take on everything. Even some people that have teams, they're still working 40, 50 hours a week. And because they just believe, they have that internal belief that, well, if I just work, I'm going to overcome it. And it's probably true. But that's also a trap. We don't have to do everything. And so the focus part of it's really hard because there's so many opportunities to get off track. But yeah, that's to me, that's been the number one thing. And the more that I can help, and part of the reason why I started the service is because we help like really busy, scattered, unfocused people do something that gives the appearance of them being really focused and really consistent without them actually having to be that way. Because a lot of my clients are not that way. They want to do everything. They're relatively unfocused. And so without a service like ours, they would have trouble cranking out a podcast every single week for the next 2 years. But when they plug into a system like ours, we can be consistent for them. And I think that's one of the big lessons for me is that you don't have to do everything yourself. And you definitely don't have to do the things that you're weak at or bad at. Pay somebody else to do it, whether it's an agency like ours or whether it's hiring somebody in-house, whatever it is, like focus on the things you're really good at and hire other people or other services or whatever to make up for the areas that you're weak in. And the people that I'm around that do that are much, much, much more successful, and the success comes easier because when it does, it doesn't just increase their workload. It doesn't just make life more complicated. And that's where I think a lot of people find themselves is, a couple more clients and it's more money, but it also makes their life more complicated. 5 or 10 more clients would break their business. And it's because they're unfocused and they're a little bit scattered. And so they can only succeed a little bit more because a lot more success would actually break their life and break their business. And so I wanted to get out of that space. And so the more focused I've become, the more I can handle more success, and the more success comes easy. And when it does come, it doesn't make me miserable because I'm already focused.
Let's talk about your business, Pursuit Results. Tell us more about it.
Yeah, so I alluded to the fact that we kind of do everything. So the basic structure is if you're a rock star coach or a business consultant or a creative agency owner who serves that market, you can basically show up on our doorstep, say, I want to start a podcast. We'll launch it in 45 days. And you show up and have great conversations and record solo episodes where you deliver content to your audience, and we do everything else. So my whole team takes it, and we've got specialists at every stage, from writing to audio engineers in Nashville to video editors that are pros out in California, and we just do everything. So once our client gets us a audio or video file, we take that and turn that into a podcast episode that goes to all the usual places like Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and we publish it. We promote it to their email list and on social media. And then we also reach out. We book 2 high-level influencers on our client shows every single month. So the people that they want to have those good conversations with, we're the ones that are reaching out and getting those people booked and excited. And then all the way down to promoting the episodes on social media and making sure that the guest has the promo in materials that they need to share their episode. So it's kind of an end-to-end turnkey, zero hassle system that the right person just plugs into and shows up, and we do the rest. And it's exactly what I built for myself. So I know what it's like to have it, and I know what it's like to not have it. And it is a major difference being able to show up to a conversation like this and know that everything else is going to happen behind the scenes without having to worry about it. So that's what we do.
Where do we find this, and how can we connect with you?
Yeah, so pursuingresults.com is the easy way. And if you're not sure if you're quite ready for that, we did just come out with a training course for internal staff, like virtual assistants and team members and interns, because a lot of people in my world, in the coaching, consulting, online business world, they may not quite be ready to start a podcast, and that's okay, but they do need to get featured, right? They do need to be interviewed on podcasts and start getting known for their one thing. And so if you go to pursuingresults.com/training, we did a training there with a client of mine where we actually go through exactly how to do that. So how to get featured on podcasts in less than a couple of hours a week, how to get micro famous in your niche, how to attract your ideal client, how to find the best podcast for you and your business. Because I just saw that was a need that we couldn't fulfill in our own agency, but all of my clients and all of my ideal people have that problem. So not only can you find out more about our production service, but if you're not quite the right fit for that, or if it's not the right time, but you do want to get featured on more podcasts, we do have that solution there too. So that's at pursuingresults.com/training.
Thank you. So, Clan, there will be more from Matt in a moment. If you are listening on one of the many podcasting platforms rather than my website and you are encouraged by Matt's journey, go to onlinesuccessjourney.com for a bonus portion of the interview. The Online Success Journey is a wonderful membership community built for people searching for the path to success. We are one big clan, and you can be part of this community for free. Once you have joined the clan, click on part 2 of Matt's journey or over 150 other journeys that are available and learn how you can find the right path for your own online success journey. That's a wrap, clan. Remember, success is a journey, patience and math.
This is not the end of the journey. We hope you've enjoyed listening to part 1 and want to be sure you know there is a second part to this and every journey podcast at onlinesuccessjourney.com. Filled with even more success tips, uplifting stories, and even a bit of fun. There are dozens of episodes only available to the members of the Online Success Journey clan. Check out the website and click on Join the Clan for more information. Patience would like to thank you for listening to this podcast, and she has a free audio gift for you at her website. Go to onlinesuccessjourney.com for instant access to this gift. Of course, you know that listening to the journeys of others helps each of us chart our own path. So make sure you're subscribed to be notified as each new interview is posted. There are so many ways to stay connected to the Online Success Journey and to listen in. And if you're enjoying the podcast, we appreciate your help in telling others. One of the best ways to share the benefit you get is to rate and review it at Stitcher and other sites by clicking the stars or completing the ratings form, by clicking thumbs up and leaving a comment on YouTube, or liking and sharing the podcast on social media. To review the podcast within iTunes, simply open iTunes to the podcast, click on Ratings and Reviews, then write a review. On behalf of Patience, and until next time, thanks once more for listening. It is our hope that this podcast will guide you on your own online success journey.